Well, I think the thing that really strikes me is that when I do get a chance to talk to activists around the world, a lot of times they're feeling pretty desperate, or they're feeling isolated, or they feel like their intuition was wrong all along, and they feel pretty hopeless. If your intuition is that nonviolent resistance works, you're right. You know, it actually does work. It's the most reliable source of change in the world, according to our data. And it's not just the most reliable source of success, it's the most reliable source of being able to live in a society you want to live in after a conflict is already over.
8 months of our revolution for freedom and justice has passed. More than 4,500 people got killed by the Syrian regime, and tens of thousands got arrested and enforced disappeared. We face one of the most brutal regimes in the region and the world, mostly with peaceful protests, songs of freedom, chanting for a new Syria and a new future, discovering for the first time within decades our voices and personalities. And how does it feel to bring down walls of fear as we stand for our beliefs?
In general, it has been, nonviolence, I think, is preferred by any serious person. You only resort to violence as a last resort. But I don't presume to tell Syrians what they ought to do. They have to work that out for themselves.
Culture, they resent us. There's enormous amounts of hatred, and it goes back in history because of resentment.
Yes, there's hatred against us. Why? As long as we are supporting harsh, brutal governments, blocking democracy and development, because of our interest in controlling the oil resources of the region, there will be a campaign of hatred against us.
I think the outcome of resort to violence is likely to be extremely destructive. Violent means generally, typically, place into power those who have used them successfully and will continue to use them, often very brutally.
We found some really impressive results about the record of nonviolent resistance, which is that it's over twice as effective in achieving both the ouster of a dictator or territorial changes than violent insurgency. My name is Erica Chenoweth. I'm an author and a scholar of civil resistance. I'm in solidarity with the Syrian people. I reject the brutality and killing that the Syrian authorities are committing against the unarmed Syrian people. And because silence is participation in this crime, I declare my participation in the resistance through the Syrian sit-in on YouTube. There are three major differences in societies that have experienced nonviolent resistance compared with those that have experienced violent resistance. In countries where there's been nonviolent resistance, they're much more likely to emerge from the conflict democratic. They're much more likely to emerge with a lower probability of relapsing into a civil war. And they're also much more likely to experience fewer civilian casualties during the conflict itself. As an example, in Syria today, the UN reports that officially 3,500 civilians have been killed in the course of the conflict. And this is a very large and disturbing figure, but it's nothing compared with the 40,000 plus that were killed in just 3 weeks of shelling of the city of Hama back in 1982, and the 200,000 people who had to flee the city for their lives.
To speak of a bottom line. The bottom line is the government has no legitimacy. We're living in the 21st century, and you have no right to hold power merely by virtue of the fact that you're the son of the person who held power before you. That's just completely unacceptable. And you can't treat a country and its people as your playpen. These are human beings. They are entitled to the same rights and the same dignities as everybody else in humankind.
Go ahead.
Hi. During your speech, you made a lot of references to Jewish people as well as certain people in your audience, not Jewish people in general, but certain people, especially in your audience, to Nazis. Now, that is extremely offensive.
I don't like and I don't respect the crocodile tears the crocodile tears.
The Jews did not take arms against the
My late father was in Auschwitz concentration camp. My late mother was in Majdanek concentration camp. Every single member of my family on both sides was exterminated. Both of my parents were in the Warsaw Ghetto Uprising. And it's precisely and exactly because of the lessons my parents taught me and my two siblings that I will not be silent when Israel commits its crimes against the Palestinians. And I consider nothing more despicable than to use their suffering and their martyrdom to try to justify the torture, the brutalization, the demolition of homes that Israel daily commits against the Palestinians. So I refuse any longer to be intimidated or browbeaten by the tears. If you had any heart in you, you would be crying for the Palestinians, not for what's being done.
I have long past seeing the virtues of violence. I used to see some virtue in it, some rightness in it, some inevitability in it, but I can't see the virtue. No. It's a cliche, but it's true. It's very corrupting. And I'll be honest with you, I found it very difficult to disagree with Nasrallah at the beginning, because I respect him very much, and I respect the Hezbollah very much. On the other hand, there comes a point where you have to sort of stop with the politics, set them aside, and just look at what's happening with a kind of depoliticized eye, and just use a moral judgment. And the moral judgment is, you can't support what's going on in Bahrain, and support what's going on in Tunisia, and support what's going on in Egypt, and suddenly have a reserve an opinion on what's going on in Syria. And so Nasrallah made a historic misjudgment, which I don't think he will be able now to extricate himself from, if for no other reason that most Syrians now loathe him, even though a year ago they deeply respected him.